Picture this. You're standing on a public sidewalk, minding your own business, recording some footage, completely legal, right? Then, out of nowhere, a cop approaches, questioning your every move. "Why are you recording?" "That seems suspicious," she says, her tone firm. It's one of those moments where you can't help but wonder, does she really not know the law? In today's video, we dive into a surprising encounter with a female officer who tries to challenge someone's right to record in public. Things get tense fast as she pushes the idea that filming is suspicious behavior. But what happens next might shock you. It's a lesson on knowing your rights and standing your ground, even when the pressure is on. How far will this officer go? And how does it all play out? Stick around because you won't want to miss this eye-opening exchange. Let's break it all down together and see who's in the right. As the officer stands there, her body language radiates authority, but her words suggest uncertainty. She starts asking questions. Who are you? Why are you recording? And what's the purpose of all this? The man with the camera remains calm, confident, and steady. It's clear he knows his rights, but he doesn't say too much just yet. Instead, he listens carefully, letting the officer reveal more about her assumptions. Around them, the street feels alive with everyday activity, people walking by, cars driving past, nothing out of the ordinary. Yet, the officer seems fixated on the camera as if it holds some deeper threat. Her tone sharpens as she presses on, throwing out phrases like security risk and suspicious behavior. You can almost feel the tension building, but something is off. Is she enforcing the law, or is this a misunderstanding of what's allowed in public spaces? The man finally speaks, but his response only deepens the conflict. Where will this confrontation lead? Stay tuned to see what unfolds next. The man takes a deep breath and calmly replies, "I'm just filming in public." That's perfectly legal, isn't it? His voice is steady, but his words clearly challenge the officer's stance. For a moment, there's silence, the kind that feels heavier than the noise of the bustling street around them. The officer shifts her weight and narrows her eyes, as if deciding how far to push. "But why are you filming here? Do you have some kind of agenda?" she counters, her voice carrying a mix of suspicion and frustration. Meanwhile, a small crowd begins to gather nearby, their curiosity piqued by the interaction. Some glance at the camera, others at the officer, exchanging quiet whispers. The man remains composed, holding his ground as he explains that his recording is for personal reasons and entirely within his rights. But the officer doesn't back down, suggesting his actions could potentially escalate concerns in the area. The tension thickens as each side digs in. Is this a misunderstanding or a power play? What happens next could change everything. The officer takes a step closer, her gaze fixed on the man holding the camera. Her voice becomes more direct. "I need to see some identification. If you've got nothing to hide, this shouldn't be an issue." The crowd shifts uneasily, sensing the tension in the air. The man hesitates for a moment, but not out of fear. He's calculating his next move. "Am I being detained, or am I free to go?" he asks, his tone firm but respectful. The question hangs in the air like a challenge, and for a split second, the officer seems caught off guard. Her authority is being questioned, and she knows the weight of her response. She glances at the small group of bystanders, now openly watching, phones in hand, recording the unfolding scene. Pressure builds as she weighs her options. "You're acting suspicious," she finally says, doubling down. The man, still calm, responds with one word: "Suspicion isn't a crime." The tension peaks, and everyone waits to see what will happen next. Before the officer can respond, another voice breaks through the tension. A man in plain clothes steps forward from the crowd, holding up a badge. "Officer, I think we need to take a step back here," he says calmly but firmly. The crowd stirs, and the dynamic shifts as the plainclothes officer positions himself between the two. It's immediately clear that this isn't a random bystander. "I'm with Internal Affairs," he adds, glancing between the officer and the man with the camera. The street seems to fall silent, the weight of his words hanging heavily in the air. The officer stiffens, her expression hardening. "I was just doing my job," she says defensively, but her voice wavers slightly. The man with the camera looks surprised, but stays quiet, letting the moment play out. The plainclothes officer turns to the man with the camera. "You're not in the wrong here," he says, his voice calm but resolute. "We've been monitoring situations like this." Suddenly, the focus shifts. Why was Internal Affairs here? And what were they looking for? The stakes just got a lot higher. The air feels electric as the Internal Affairs officer continues. "We've been reviewing complaints about officers misinterpreting public recording laws. This is one of those situations." He turns to the female officer, his expression firm. "You know the law. Recording in public isn't a crime, and unless there's a clear threat, you're overstepping." The officer's face flushes, but she nods slightly, realizing there's no room for argument. The man with the camera finally speaks. "So, am I free to go now?" His voice is calm but sharp, cutting through the tension. The Internal Affairs officer nods. "You were never being detained. You're well within your rights to record." The crowd murmurs in approval, and some begin dispersing, but not before capturing the moment on their own phones. Just as the man lowers his camera, the Internal Affairs officer looks at him and says something unexpected. "You're part of the reason we're out here. Your videos have brought attention to these issues. Keep it up." The man blinks, surprised, as the officer walks away. What started as a confrontation ended with validation, but the message was clear: accountability cuts both ways. As the crowd thins out, the man with the camera takes a moment to process what just happened. What started as a tense encounter ended in a way he didn't expect, with validation and a reminder of the importance of standing up for your rights. He nods to himself, appreciating the Internal Affairs officer's acknowledgement, but also aware of the bigger picture. This wasn't just about him. It was about ensuring public accountability, both for citizens and law enforcement. The female officer walks away quietly, and it's unclear whether she's reflecting on her actions or just eager to move on. The man glances at his camera, knowing this footage will serve as another reminder that education about public rights is still needed. With a deep breath, he turns off the recording, feeling a mix of relief and determination. As he walks away, he reflects on the power of knowledge and composure. Moments like this matter, not just for him, but for everyone who values transparency and justice.